A very good morning and welcome to Sunrise on Soul Television. My name is Laura Amanzi and it is always a pleasure to have you with us. Yes, today is World Autism Day. So today is one of the days that has been set aside to remember autism. And of course, I'm still here in the studio as always with Amaka. But before Amaka comes on air with her beautiful bluing, she's trying to be compliant because the color of autism is actually blue. And of course, there's also the colors of the rainbow that is attached to it. So today on the program, we're going to be looking at understanding autism. What is it all about? And then after that, we'll be looking at the newspaper headlines. And from there, we'll be looking at what is trending on streets of social media. All this will be coming your way. But first, let's look at Amaka looking so radiant and beautiful as always. And she's even forming.
Of course, I am not forming, right?
Yes.
I'm not forming. But it feels good, really, to know that people are getting the desired attention that they require. Because sometimes what we do not understand, we fear in the society. So we see some of those people who are autistic, and one word we'll call them mbe. All right, and that's out of ignorance because imbecility has nothing to do with autism. So I'm excited we'll get to discuss it and talk about it today. And yes, we decided to be color compliant because there is a hashtag Light Up Blue. It's just to create awareness that we have those people in our midst. We need to understand them so that they also would live as much of a normal life as their situation would allow. Amaka, thank you so very much, and thank you, madam, for the rousing introduction. I hear.
Please. All right, we'll take a short break, and when we come back from the break, our guest for today will be joining us to be discussing understanding autism. Please don't touch that dial.
You're welcome back to Sunrise on Soul Television. Now, every year on April 2nd, the world unites to observe World Autism Awareness Day, a day that has been dedicated to increasing understanding, promoting acceptance, and advocating for the rights of autistic individuals. This year, in 2025, the theme is Advancing Neurodiversity and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, highlighting the importance of embracing neurological differences while working towards global sustainability goals. But beyond the themes and the campaigns, how much do we truly understand autism? How much do we truly understand people who are autistic? How well do we make the society habitable for them? And today, as we commemorate the World Autism Awareness Day 2025, we are honored to have our guest with us, a renowned psychiatrist, a doctor par excellence, who is an associate professor of psychiatry in the renowned university, Ebonyi State University, EBBC, here in Abakaliki. We are so glad you could join us today. He's going to help us delve into this questions about what autism is, to dispel some of the myths and help us understand better how to deal with autism and autistic people. Thank you so much, sir, for finding time to join us on the program.
Thank you, Amaka, for inviting me.
You're welcome, sir. So let's get right into it. When we talk about autism, what really is autism?
Autism is a term that came into being in 1943 when a psychiatrist called Leo Kanner brought up the term. Prior to that time, there was nothing like autism. And by then, it was assumed to be a very rare condition, existing in 1 per 1,000 children. But with time, with increasing awareness, it has come to be known that it is very common with us, and that as much as 1 in every 100 persons can have autism. Autism is actually taken as a childhood disorder. We call it pervasive developmental disorder. It starts from childhood, but it becomes noticed at the end of 3rd year, usually between 30 months and 36 months of age. The child develops normally, but at the age of 30, 36 months, the child now begins to show some deficits in the areas of communication, social interaction, and pattern of behavior. So that is what autism is. It's characterized by impairments in the areas that the child is supposed to exhibit normally with other children, as it pertains to communication, interaction with others, and they also restricted repertoire of behavior. You know, their behavior becomes stereotypes, and then they are not seen to be doing what others are doing at that particular age.
All right, just before we start expatiating on the signs and symptoms of autism, we want to understand this year's theme, which is Advancing Neurodiversity and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. What informed this year's theme?
Over time, from 2007, the United Nations General Assembly saw the need to create awareness every year on autism, and they chose 2nd of April, which is today, to commemorate it. The emphasis has always been on awareness, but with time, they now discover that it is not just being aware of it that matters. We should also fashion a way, bring up policies and practices that will help these children who are supposed to be aided, who are supposed to be seen as part and parcel of us, and not discriminated against, you know, to bring them in and give them assistance that will help them grow up, and then also be seen as part of people who can contribute to society. You know, we don't just emphasize the negative aspect of the illness, we also want to bring out the positive aspect of it. So this year's own now talks about advancing neurodiversity. In the essence, this will bring out, you know, things that will bring them into inclusivity in participating in every aspect of life, so that they can grow up, contribute to society. I said earlier that there are some parts that they show strength. For example, autistic children can have very good talents in music. They have also known to have good talents in arts and sometimes in mathematical abilities. So we want to bring those strengths into being and then help them, make them acceptable, and also make them contribute to the society.
Okay, so while you were trying to explain what autism is about, something popped up. You called it a disorder. I'm trying to remember the particular word you used. Pervasive disorder, which means that if it is a pervasive disorder, it's not a disease. Because some people might actually think that, you know, autism is a disease. But you've called it a pervasive disorder. Can you break this more, down more and relate it to, you know, the brain development?
Well, when we talk about autism spectrum disorder, initially it was seen as a single entity, but now we have now seen it as a spectrum. A spectrum in the sense that it has a range. At this age, you have the mild. At the other end, you have the extreme, which is the severe. So in between, you have people that are individualistic. You know, the people that are mild may be able to walk, they may be able to go to normal schools, but the people that have the extreme side of the illness, which we call the severe, may need some assistance. And in between, you have some people that fall into the middle, and they're able to function according to the severity of the disorder. Why we call it a disorder is that it is actually something that starts at early age, and it has some connection to the brain. For example, when we talk about cause, we are not able to say this is a particular cause. But there are some relationship effects that it has with the brain. For example, about 20% of children who have autistic spectrum disorder develop epilepsy along the line, especially towards adolescence. Some of them also may have learning disability, mental retardation as it is called in the olden times. So that is why it is considered as a disorder. But in this year's awareness, we are trying to tell people that we should accept them, we should help them, we should encourage them, banking on their strengths and the positive aspects to help them live an inclusive life.
Now, all right, Prof, when you're talking about this disorder for children with ASD, there's been this myth and misconceptions about it, especially in this part of the world, where people assume that for children with ASD issues, it's either their grandfather or there's a cultural thing to it. So what do you say to that when it has to do with these kids? People say, okay, maybe it's their father or their mother that has committed one crime or the other. So the stigmatization, how do you speak to that?
Well, in psychiatry, we have seen that there is a lot of stigma attached to everything that has to do with psychiatry. And unfortunately, in our own society, just 2 days ago, I had a patient that had what we call complex partial seizure. The father is a nurse, the mother is a nurse. And yet, they were talking about the patient being manipulated. I have another female that I'm treating also for the same condition here in Abakaliki. The parents are highly educated, but they still see it as something that comes from either manipulation, causes from the family, or something that has to do with people inflicting it on them. So I am not surprised that people also have the same pattern of thoughts towards ASD. But from science, even though we cannot pinpoint the exact cause, but research has shown that it tends to run in families. There is some genetic basis to etiology of autistic disorders. The fact that it is also associated with epilepsy and learning disability also points out that it can also be caused from something in the brain and not necessarily from outside. So it is not something that has to do with what the family has committed in the past or any sin of the child or any sin of the parents. It's an entirely a medical problem.
Okay, so thank you for at least putting paid to this particular myth or maybe misconception that people have, that maybe it's manipulation or it's epilepsy. When you were talking about what autism really is, you said it could actually be noticed between 30 and 36 months. All right. I'm aware that a new research says with AI tools, you could notice it, you could detect it for as early as 6 months, but that's a story for another day. What I'm concerned about now is, can you let us in on the symptoms and signs? When people have children, what are those things that they begin to see in those children and they say, I think this child might be autistic?
Yes. Suspicions about autism spectrum disorders may actually emanate from home or from the teachers. Okay. Because it doesn't just come suddenly. It's a gradual thing. You begin to notice that there is impaired communication. This child is supposed to be forming particular words at a particular age. But for ASD children, they will not be able to pronounce some words. They may use monosyllables, so there is impairment in communication. The child will not be able, when compared to the previous siblings or other children of the same age, the pattern and the expanse of communication that they display will be impaired. That is one. Then there is also what we call impairment in social interaction. The child will avoid interacting with other children. As children grow up, they play with mates. But the child that has autism will withdraw. There is that social withdrawal. He will not play with his mates. He will want to be on his own. And then if a stranger comes to cuddle the child may not, show interest. Like when you want to carry a child, the child may show attention,
open
show
up their
welcome.
hands.
Yes.
Yeah.
But for autistic children, they will tend to withdraw. They will tend to attach only to their parents or to any particular person that is close to them. So that is in the area of social interaction. They also have what we call gaze avoidance. You want to talk with them, they will not look at you straight at the eye.
Contact.
So that is one of it. Then they also have what we call a pattern of behavior that is restricted and repetitive. They want to wear the same clothes. They will just choose one of their clothing. If you want to change it, they will resist. If you want to put another one, they will resist it. Or they will choose a particular toy, and they grow so much in love with that toy that they don't want to leave it. That is restricted repertoire of behavior. Then these children, as they grow up also, they may also manifest some other things that I have said, like having seizures and epilepsy. You also, as they go to school, they will not be able to cope. They will not learn appropriate for their age. That at this level they should be taught this, they should be taught that, but they will not be able to cope. So these are some of the things that will tell parents to watch out for, and then teachers too.
All right. We are also looking at the issue of temper tantrums. How, because like some parents that have this issue, or their kids have autism, you discover that the coping mechanism is actually not always easy. Now, my question is, how do parents cope with autistic child, especially as it has to do with temper? You discover that some of them complain that these kids tend to be, like you just pointed out, they're withdrawn, they're incommunicative, they're not easily pulled out, and when you try to, make them do the things you want them to do, they have this temper issue. How can parents or teachers deal with this? Are there mechanisms that can be used?
Yeah, thank you, Laura. The children with autism, in addition to showing temper tantrums, can also be hyperactive. You find it difficult to keep them in one place. You tell them, sit down here, before you know it, they are jumping into the bedroom. I remember a particular child that was brought to my house that has ASD. They were barely told to sit down at the parlor when the child ran into one of our bedrooms. And all our children were scared. That hyperactivity and then showing of temper tantrums are common in ASD. What we tell parents to do is, one, to accept that this is a problem. And when they have accepted that this is a problem, they also can seek for assistance. We'll tell them that this is not a spiritual matter. We'll start taking the children to churches, start taking them to religious homes or native doctors, which is very common. Sometimes, if it is in a female, I also want to point out that this ASD is commoner in males, but it can also occur in females. It is 4 times more common in males than in females. So when it occurs in females, especially, they may be termed obanje. So we advise parents to accept the reality on ground, seek for medical attention as early as possible, because it is an area that both the pediatricians and the psychiatrists can give a lot of assistance.
May I ask if autism is a disorder that can, just occur mid-age? Maybe a child has grown past being a toddler to maybe an adolescent or even a young teenager, and suddenly begins to, exhibit some of those symptoms. Because when you're talking, you listed quite a number of, symptoms that we should watch out for, which I think parents need to know that it's not something, I don't think it's something that you see one symptom and you say, okay, this is it. So my question is this something that can develop even after the initial 36 months? Is this something that can develop maybe as the child grows into adulthood, or maybe just adult? And in addition to that question, what are some of the challenges in diagnosing autism, especially in a country like ours where we cannot boast of top-notch Medicare?
Well, Amaka, thank you for the question. The ASD actually gets noticed. Some literature will say as early as 6 months, as you said. But in our environment, sometimes it's not very obvious. until the child gets to 30 to 36 months. It is something that has always been there.
Okay.
Yes. The initial phase is that the child develops well at a very early age, and then it comes. The problem is that it may not be noticed. Just as it is a spectrum, it is a range. When it is mild, the mother may not notice that there is a problem. The parents, the siblings may not notice that there is a problem. It may even be noticed in the school. The parents may know, they think that, well, it is his own way of development. He is having delayed speech, he's having delayed interaction with other people as compared to the siblings. So it is not something that jumps at a later age. Okay. It may always have been there. If it is the severe form, at the other extreme of severity, it will be noticed quickly. But if it has a mild phase, it may not be noticed, even though it had been there. So ASD does not jump in at a later age. Okay. It rather has a pattern. For some people, the symptoms get less with time. And with education, with assistance from the parents, the symptoms begin to decline. And some of them, about 20% of them later, may be able to go to normal school. And that 20% may be able to work in a normal environment like ours. So, but some other 20% may need some assistance and maybe a care at home.
All right, sir. When you talked about autism not really being a disease and the root cause has not really been determined. Now, going through some of the literatures I've read on it, some pointed that delay in marriage, like you did mention genetics, that it could be from genetics, or when a man or a woman did not marry early, that when elderly people have children, the tendency of having an autistic child could occur. Is this true?
Well, I just forgot to complete Amaka's issue on the diagnosis.
Okay.
She talked something about how can we diagnose it in our environment. Most psychiatric syndromes, collection of symptoms and signs will make up what we call a syndrome. It's not diagnosed in the lab. So for ASD, there is no marker for now that you can say, I'll go and look for in the lab. I'll take blood, I'll take stool, or I'll take anything and check in the lab. If the patient has it, he has ASD. So there is no genetic marker, there is no laboratory marker. What we'll do is purely by clinical observation, by the history that the parents give you, and what you're able to see the child, what you observe in the child, you will be able to make a diagnosis. The suspicion comes from home, from school, but the diagnosis now rests on the professionals, especially the psychiatrists. Then you are talking about the
genetics, either the delayed marriage, yes, and all that.
Yes. Generally in medicine, we will know that marriage, especially for the females beyond 35 years, is prone to a lot of problems when they have children. The number one is always what we call Down syndrome. So it's also speculated that marrying late, especially for the females, when they marry between 35 to 40, that they can have children that are prone to not just ASD, but to other genetic problems.
Oh, wow. Let's bring this down home, because as I said earlier, sometimes what we do not understand, we tend to avoid or fear. Let's say, for instance, in my neighborhood, there is a child who is autistic. How do I relate with this child? I am not the child's parent. I'm not the child's teacher. How do I relate with this child to ensure that the environment, the child sees the society as a friendly place and as, somewhere where he can be himself?
We have enumerators about the symptoms, and the best approach is knowing how to tackle some of their challenges. For example, we can start from their strengths. A child who is gifted in drawing, though autistic, can be encouraged. You will not insist, I want you to read this course, I want you to be this, or what are you going to be an artist for? So we'll start from their from their strengths.
Perceived strengths.
Yes, from their strengths. Some of them will be exceptionally good in mathematics. Before you even call out a mathematical question, they have given you the answer. So we encourage them along those lines. Then for those that are good in music, we also encourage them in that. And then for their challenges and the difficulties, we also address them. For example, a child that has problem with language development, you will not get irritated when you are speaking with him. You come to his level or her level and, talk. If the child is also hyperactive, you also can address it by being cooperative with the child. Like that one child I talked about that came into my house and jumped on the bedroom, a house he's coming to for the first time. We did not go start chasing him out, backing at him. You'll be sympathetic to him, bring him, receive him warmly, and then tell him to sit down. So we go to the places they have setbacks and address them. Then for the obsession for sameness, we can gradually withdraw the toys that they are particularly attached to and replace it with another one. You can also, for the dress that the CC must be worn, you can bring something that is nearer to that and gradually, get them to accept other dresses. So the bottom line is being sympathetic to their cause and then understanding that this is a problem that they have. And it's not that they are badly brought up or that there is bad parenting, as was initially thought, that autistic children are product of bad parenting. No, it is not. So when we understand that these challenges are not of their own making and that they can be helped, then we'll fashion ways, individualistic, especially as I say that is a spectrum, the mild to the severe. So each child should be addressed based on what the challenges are and the level.
All right, Prof, just to begin to, let's say, round it up now, are there controlled environments that children with autism can be raised in? And in being a psychiatrist, your facilities, how can parents access it, especially for those who are in the hinterland who may not even know that these things are not witchcraft like they originally thought? Do you carry out awareness in hinterlands where parents who are having issues can begin to understand and take their words to such places or come to your clinics for proper guidance?
We're already doing the campaign. The one we're doing here is part of the campaign.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think it needs to be sustained. One of the greatest challenges we have in psychiatry is ignorance. Before we will talk about discrimination. Our people don't believe that psychiatric problems can be addressed. Many people prefer to take them to places that help cannot come to them. Religious homes, native doctors, and then they end up delaying the treatment. When they come to us, the delayed treatment becomes a problem because when a challenge comes in psychiatry and it is quickly addressed, the patient responds faster. So we have Department of Psychiatry in the Federal Teaching Hospital here, and we'll have all the personnel that are needed to address problems of ASD. We'll have consultant psychiatrists, we'll have psychiatric nurses, we have social workers, occupational therapists, and they work as a team. So we want to use this medium to tell people that if your child is having any of these things that we have said, bring them to us for proper assessment and management. We'll be able to guide you. If there are drugs to be given, we'll give drugs. If there are other sections that need to be given, like psychotherapy and then assistance, we'll do that. You talked about restricted homes for the autistic children. Yes, they are places where they can be admitted. For example, in Enugu, there is one at Abakba that is dedicated to people that have learning disability. And then ASD can also be addressed there. It's a school, so they go to school there. They teach them beyond just things that should be taught in school. How to cope at home, and then every other thing that is needed to prevent. And I think there is one also at St. John. I don't know how far. In 2019, I visited them, but I have not been there again. Okay. So maybe I'll find out whether they have expanded and whether it's still existing. So we have facilities in Ebonyi
All
that
right.
can address ASD.
Just before we go, sir, help us put paid to this. Are there particular ways that autistic children live? Because when you were talking about autistic children, I never thought of autistic children as being hyperactive, you know. But while you were talking about that, I was trying to connect one-on-one with a child I know who is, I mean, the first day he was in my house, that was exactly what happened. He was jumping everywhere. And the mom was complaining he wasn't exactly developing at his pace. My son, who would be at the same, you know, would be a peer with him, was way ahead of him. And even my twins, who he was older than, seemed to be ahead of him. And now I'm looking at that child actually looks strange. It's like they have bulky eyes. And then please help us put pay to is autism imbecility. Because so many, I've had many people look at children who have autism as, imbe, as we call them in the local parlance.
Well, we hate to hear derogatory terms when describing our patients. So we don't talk about, in fact, even mental retardation is no longer used. We now call it learning disability. So we also don't talk about imbecility. Autistic children are not imbeciles. Imbecility, in quote, will be what a layman used to describe people who have low IQ.
Okay.
When they have low IQ, they will not be able to do what is expected of them, and their behavior will, of course, be at variance with their age. At the severe ends of ASD, the IQ may not meet up with what it should be, but they are not imbeciles. So,
All right.
So they don't look, sorry, ma, so they don't look a certain way, right?
no, there is no particular physical appearance that have been described with ASD.
And when I have an autistic child around me, it's not as if I hug the child, I'll contact it, or if the child stays around my children, they'll become autistic.
No, it's not infectious.
Okay.
It's not infectious. 2 weeks ago, somebody had epilepsy just at my clinic, and everybody was running away. You know, they feel that their saliva infected. It is the same way that ASD is. It is not infectious.
Okay.
Interacting with them, hugging with them, playing with them, eating with them, if they will accept. You know, because part of the problem is that
They will not even,
They cannot be transmitted.
All right.
Not transmit anything from
All right, Dr. Monday Igwe, Associate Professor of Psychiatry with Ebonyi State University. We want to say a very big thank you for being with us on today's edition of Understanding Autism, as it has to do with World Day that has been designated to remember and to be more inclusive as it has to do with our children. Thank you so much, sir, for being on the program today.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Amaka. And I hope to be invited another day.
Certainly, we will invite you. All right, now we take a short break now to make room for our news. And after that, Sunrise continues. Please stay with us.